When people talk about Michigan's contribution to the Allied war effort during the Second World War, what comes to mind are the factories of Detroit, Flint, and other cities that are collectively known as the arsenal of democracy that produced the war material that was crucial to Allied victory during the Second World War. A long forgotten part of Michigan's role during the Second World War was the internment of German and Italian POWs inside the state. Now, you're probably wondering, why were POW camps established in Michigan of all places? Surely there are other locations where the camps would be better suited. The reasoning why Michigan was chosen to host these POW camps is complicated. During the North African campaign, British and Commonwealth troops began to capture large numbers of enemy combatants. These enemy combatants were originally held in camps located in Allied-controlled areas of North Africa, and then were later transported to the British Isles for long-term internment. After the Allied invasion of North Africa, which was called Operation Torch, which took place in late 1942, and the surrender of the Africa Corps in early 1943, thousands of additional Axis soldiers became POWs. The influx of thousands of mouths to feed puts the already stressed supply chains in the British Isles to the breaking point. With the costly battles between Allied convoys transporting food and other materials necessary to maintain the British Isles, and the U-boat wolfpack seeking to starve the United Kingdom into surrender, Winston Churchill, the British Prime Minister, requested that the United States take responsibility of handling thousands of newly captured Axis soldiers. Thousands of POWs were loaded into ships and transported across the Atlantic to the United States, where they were originally held in camps located in the southern states. With millions of Americans serving the armed forces, industries across the country were suffering from chronic labor shortages. The labor shortage was especially damaging to the war effort in Michigan. Despite women entering the workforce in greater numbers than ever before, the need for labor could not be met with the available workforce. Industrial production had taken the lion's share of the available manpower and left other industries, like the agricultural industry, desperately short of the workers needed to meet production goals. This labor shortage was not caused just by the exit of young men from the workforce, but also by the strict gasoline rations established by the government. These gasoline rations prevented migrant workers from the southern United States traveling up to the Midwest to be employed by Midwestern farmers during harvest season. There were calls by Midwestern farmers to figure out a solution to the labor shortage. A solution was found in the 1929 Geneva Convention on the Treatment of Prisoners of War. The convention allowed the use of POWs in labor if the industry in question was not related to the production of war material. Under this provision, it was suggested that German and Italian POWs could be used as laborers in the agricultural industry. The War Department created a pilot program to test the viability of using POWs as labor, and Michigan was one of the states that was selected to host the pilot program. The labor program was directly managed by the Office of the Provost Marshal General, OPMG for short. OPMG was responsible for ensuring that the requirements laid out in the Geneva Convention on the treatment of POWs were followed strictly. In total, there were 32 POW camps located around Michigan, with about 6,000 POWs being held in the state in total. At Fort Custer, there was a separate section of the base that was used to detain prisoners from SS units. This was done to separate Nazi fanatics from the general prison population. Before the POWs were dispatched to labor camps across the state, individual prisoners were vetted to determine if they were safe to be under limited security. Individuals who were determined to be a security risk were detained at Fort Custer. Of the 32 POW camps in Michigan, I will be focusing on in this video 5 of the camps: Fort Custer, Fort Wayne, Camp Osso, Camp Sidnaw, and Camp Spada. The reason behind focusing on just these 5 camps is due to the limited availability of records on the POW system in Michigan. This is because many of the records were destroyed after the war by the War Department, and much of the information available today is from first-person sources or newspaper articles that were written around the time of the POW camps. POWs programs were established in Benton Harbor and Cairo, Michigan. The POWs first began arriving on September 27, 1943, and were immediately put to work. The first group of prisoners were sent to Benton Harbor and tasked with harvesting grapes for local produce companies. Local companies had to apply to the War Department to request for POW labor in their fields. A portion of the Benton Harbor POWs were transferred in October to Cairo to harvest sugar beets for local companies. One of the local companies that employed the most POWs was the Michigan Sugar Company. The program was declared a success by the War Department, and plans were put in motion to expand the POW labor system across the state. Fort Custer was selected to be the main hub for the internment of POWs in Michigan. Fort Custer was chosen because of its size and its status as an active military base. Many of the POWs were then transferred from Fort Custer to other camps located around the state. Many of these camps were originally established under FDR's Civilian Conservation Corps in the 1930s and were available for use as labor housing. Not all the prisoners, though, were ethnically German. They're a mixture of Hungarians, Italians, Romanians, and other ethnic groups composed of the prisoners. Though it must be noted that most of the Italian POWs were stationed in Fort Wayne, which is an old fort located inside the city of Detroit. The experience of Italian POWs changed after the surrender of Italy to the Allies in September of 1943 and Italy's subsequent declaration of war on Nazi Germany. Due to this change in status of Italy no longer being an enemy of the Allies, Italian POWs at Fort Wayne were given the option to volunteer for a new organization called the Italian Service Unit. If they volunteered for the Italian Service Unit, members would be given the option to work in jobs that were previously unavailable to them as POWs. For example, some of the new members of the Italian Service Unit were allowed to work as clerks at the local Air Force Base in Selfridge and elsewhere. Camp Spada was one of the seasonal camps that was occupied during the harvest season, with the laborers being transferred back to Fort Custer during the winter months. At Camp Spada, German POWs were put to work harvesting produce for local apple orchards. The first group of German prisoners arrived in late August to begin construction of their own camp under the supervision of military police. The camp's construction was finished by early September, and was able to welcome the hundreds of additional POWs that would labor in the apple orchards. One of the major employers of German POWs was Kraft Orchards. The son of the owner of the orchard noted that German POWs would work diligently and regularly produce 100 bushels of apples every single day. The work of the POWs allowed many apple orchards to remain open and harvest their crop during the wartime. The Upper Peninsula of Michigan was home only to around 1,000 POWs in total throughout the war. One of the camps that was established there was Camp Sidnaw. The camp's purpose was to provide housing for German POWs who would provide labor to local lumber companies in harvesting lumber from the forests. Lumber harvested from the forest would provide materials used to create crates that would ship war material across the planet. The POW camp was established in February of 1944 and would be occupied until 2 years later in April of 1946. Unlike the POW camps located in the Lower Peninsula, POW camps in the Upper Peninsula had their prisoners stay there year-round due to the isolation of the camps. At first, when the prisoners were first employed in harvesting lumber for local lumber companies, there were cases of prisoners intentionally damaging logging equipment, but most of the issues were the result of inexperienced prisoners using equipment incorrectly and causing accidents that involved damaged equipment and injury to the operators. The last camp I will be discussing in this video is Camp Osso, which was located at Osso Speedway. Many of the POWs located at this camp were used by major food canning companies during the harvest season. The companies that made use of the POW labor included the W.R. Roach Canning Company and Aunt Jane's Foods. POWs were also available for employment by small farmers, and this benefited the small farmers immensely. Due to POW labor, local farmers were able to harvest and plant their crops. In the next video, I will go into more details about the individual camps covered and how the POWs adapted to the new surroundings. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and I'll see you next time on the History Informer.